session, a Sage session. I think this is number 11. And thanks for joining us. I am Kevin, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself. That way you can they can hear and make sure that you guys can hear us all.
Okay. My name's Jake Eagle. For those who don't know me, nice to see you.
And I'm Hannah Eagle, the other half of this Eagle team.
Yeah, and they come to you from Hawaii, and they come to you from the mountains of Hawaii, and I'm in the mountains of Colorado. So we are duly representing the mountains here. So yeah, I can see folks are already in there, and just let us know that you can hear us sufficiently, and we will officially start.
Yeah, particularly let us know if you can hear us because we're not using a special mic today. It's a little bit windy. But if it's okay, we'll just keep going. And if not, we'll make some adjustments.
Sounds good on
Okay.
my end. Christy's in there. She says, hi, I'm Christy. Is that a thumbs up that you can hear us? If we're both good, then we will roll. Aloha, brother Jared. Hey man, thanks. I just listened to your messages before I got on here, so I'll respond when we're done here. All right, my brother's here. That's all I needed. I'm ready to go. All right, here we go. Well, thanks. This is the 11th session that we've had talking on the SAGE construct, the SAGE process, the SAGE operating system. And that's subjective awareness and genuine expression. If you're somehow here and haven't gotten it yet, go to sageprocess.com and you can enter your email, and all of our life devotion in that blueprint is available to you absolutely free. And for $19.99, you can add a potato peeler as well. So, Jake, you want to introduce our topic for the day?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is spend some time talking a little bit about an article that I wrote and put on Substack on Sunday. And it was talking about Ram Dass, his body of work. There's a new book that's coming out that's based on Ram Dass's writings and teachings. And Kevin sent us a advanced copy because he's going to be interviewing the woman who wrote the foreword to the book. So we were looking at a couple of the chapters and thought that there was a very interesting parallel in terms of SAGE. Ram Dass is talking about the idea that there's not an us and a them, and that the very idea that there's an us and a them creates all sorts of problems. And what he was advocating is that we start to recognize oneness, that we're all experiencing essentially a similar experience of consciousness. And he's encouraging people to break from what he calls the illusion of individuality and experience this idea of oneness, this way of being. And Hannah and I have been doing this work for a long time. We've been involved in different psychological and some spiritual communities. And one of the things that we've noticed is that as much as we support many of the spiritual disciplines and the intention behind them, we see that people have a hard time getting from where they are to where the spiritual masters are suggesting they could be, that it's a leap. And we don't disagree with the intention at all, but we think that the leap makes it unrealistic. And I've known so many people who have been in spiritual communities for years, decades, and they're still striving to get somewhere. It's as if they don't have a clear enough roadmap. And we think that SAGE actually, instead of asking you to take a leap, it's like having rungs on a ladder where you climb up one rung at a time. And each rung you climb, you are opening up and elevating your level of consciousness. Does it get you to oneness? I don't know. I've never been a fan of that idea because it seems so unattainable. I appreciate what Ram Dass is saying, but whether SAGE gets us to the same endpoint or not, I don't know. But what I do believe is that this process gives people something very practical to do. And if we exercise ourselves in the SAGE orientation, we clearly elevate our level of consciousness. And in doing it, we change our relationship to ourselves, to other people. We change our relationship to so many things, our beliefs, our physical embodiment, how we relate to our own bodies, our own minds, our own emotions. So that's kind of the essence of what I was writing in the article. And Kevin thought it would be a fun topic for us to dig into a little bit today. So that's our intention.
I am working to or entertaining his concept of oneness and really just kind of holding it as a filter as I go about my life and consider it and appreciate it. Right now, I relate most to just connectedness, connection with myself first, and then from that connectedness to everything outside of myself, the people and the things outside. And if that's an aspect of oneness, I mean, as you guys know, we all put different meanings to different words. I'm appreciating it again. Whether it's the oneness that he explains, which again is defined by him, and but connectedness, I do relate to. But to your aspect of a ladder, he shares in the book very openly. I think I read it. Of course, I'm reading it so much. 1961, while he's a teacher at Harvard. Was it Harvard or Yale?
Yeah, professor at
Harvard.
Harvard.
He's a professor there, and he has a psilocybin journey in essence, and has this, cosmic, transcendent enlightenment, experience. And man, is that sexy to me. It sounds great. And I am also continually following, studying, gleaning from other people that I respect who did not have that experience. I would call them contemplatives. That they live a contemplative life day in and day out, and I find some of the same perspectives of. And so I look at Sage as more maybe that. I mean, it'd be great if you read the Sage blueprint, go download it. And if you have a great, glorious, orgasmic, transcendent experience, let us know. That'd be awesome. I'd love to hear about that. Or if you do it along with mushrooms, that'd be great as well. But yeah, I look at this as the daily working out. There are a lot of aspects. I mean, when I first came in contact with you guys, some of the concepts that you have in your books, Jake, I looked at them, and I blew my mind to a degree intellectually. But then the daily walking out was more of the latter. It was every day. As we've talked about, it was the integration. It was the daily, moment by moment integration that is so. I wish I had a graph. What a great thing would that be to show me what my level of awareness or consciousness is today, as opposed to a year and a half ago. And I would think that it's dramatically greater. Now, on the spectrum, am I still an infant? Am I an adolescent? Am I a young adult? I don't know. I don't know where I am. But the daily working out of it, which the language, of course, is just dramatic in my life too. And watching myself realize that for the past 5 minutes of talking, I feel very conscious. Or the past 5 minutes, apparently I was on autopilot because I was just going with no awareness. And just there's my ladder.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said and then come back to the latter. So you talked about value and connection, and you use that word a lot in the last week or two. Connection, kind of replacing the idea of oneness. And I've shared with you that I think connection can take many forms. People can connect around their suffering. People can connect and commiserate. And so a couple of days ago, you said, what I really mean is conscious connection.
Right.
And I think that's really essential to differentiate. A lot of people are connected, and they're connected in ways that are codependent, very unhealthy. One person is the victim, the other is the perpetrator. They're connected, but it's not constructive. So it's this conscious connection that I think you've been talking about, which I find really an important distinction.
Okay, to that, yeah, I think about in because you're right. I kind of came at some aspects of connection that you didn't connect with, and I'm grateful because I feel like yeah, I did connect before this time. Did I have connections? Great connections, but I look at them now and it feels sporadic or happenstance or from a striving, as opposed to now I feel like I am much more just creating, consciously creating those connections and more aware of what does and what doesn't and what I think will and what I think uh, won't. So yeah, the conscious connection. I think as I was pondering this, I was trying to minimize the connections in the past. And when you when you challenge that somewhat, I thought, gosh, yeah, I've had great connections. I feel very privileged and gifted to. But then, especially if I felt like I was then losing them, like they were at threat, I devastated myself to lose that connection of a relationship or a circumstance or an accomplishment or a status or whatever. And now I feel a conscious connection that doesn't feel threatened. Feels like the threat is gone.
I don't
And
threat, I don't
go ahead.
threaten myself.
I threaten myself.
I don't
I
threaten
don't threaten
myself.
myself.
Yeah. If I'm conscious, I don't.
Right.
If I'm unconscious, I do. And there are aspects in my life, even as I continue to navigate a unhealthy relationship with my former wife, I see those. I'm much more aware of that threat feeling coming along. And this goes to the sage. So am I just completely sage, completely secure with my internal world and identity? Apparently not. But when I'm conscious of it, then I can sage myself. I can sane myself and continue up the ladder.
Yeah, I think this is a difference, the shift in our relating going back 20 years. I've said this in other sage conversations we've had, but we had a good basic relationship from day one. But we weren't, at the time when we came together, we didn't know about sage. And we would have tension or conflict, and we would not understand really why we get stuck in certain unhealthy patterns. And so it was a lack of consciousness, it was a lack of awareness. But even if you had told us what the issue was, for example, if you had explained that I was projecting my feelings onto Hannah and blaming her for them, I wouldn't have known what to do if I didn't have a different way to use language. And so when we started using the language, sage language, subjective language, that's when we started climbing the rungs of the ladder. So just imagine you have a relationship with someone, and all of a sudden you start to take responsibility for whatever your emotions are instead of thinking the other person is causing them. That's an example of being more conscious, more aware, and taking more responsibility. Then imagine if you started to recognize that neither of you are ever talking about one objective reality out there. You're always talking about your interpretation. So this is to me, I relax when I realize this. There's not one thing, one meaning that we're going to argue over. We just see things in our own unique ways. So each one of these is a rung on the ladder that shifted our dynamic without having to delve deeply into why our dynamic was the way it was. And my belief is that people can spend years, if not decades, delving into the why. And they're making up answers all the time, but it doesn't necessarily change the way they relate with themselves or other people. So this practice of bringing in the language is really, it's vital to this practice.
And this practice of um, each step on the ladder gives you a new base to go from. You continue to practice daily. We've gotten to a place where we don't feel like we're climbing the ladder anymore. We don't even have to. We relate consciously without striving.
Yeah, and if we don't, for some reason, it's as simple as one of us reminding the other, or hopefully we can remind ourselves. And usually that's through humor. We just kind of make fun of each other and point out, oh, it's so terrible, so and so did that to you. Or, oh, it's so terrible that so and so made you feel the way you're feeling. And we both know immediately we're laughing at ourselves. We're going, yeah, right, right, right. Because we had slipped away from that conscious awareness, which uh, it takes practice, but I don't actually think it's that hard to do.
I was thinking when you were talking about your ex-wife and how helpful it is to be able to see that that's that person just doing themselves, and it really doesn't have anything to do with me. If there's something that I recognize that I could improve upon when that person is telling me about me, then I can take responsibility for that. But otherwise, if I just realize that that person is just talking about their perception of me or the situation, then I can relax and keep my sovereignty.
Yeah, listen, witness, pay attention, be with that person instead of being in a state of reaction.
Right.
That goes back to what Kevin said earlier about threatening himself when he's not conscious. That's what we all do when we're not conscious. We're surprised by things. We feel the need to defend ourselves. We're in what's called threat physiology, which makes sense. But as we become conscious, wake up, take more responsibility, then we're very unlikely to feel threatened in the same ways. We would still feel threatened if something were going to potentially harm us physically. But we've talked about the fact that's kind of separate from psychological threats, which is what we're trying to reduce.
And yes, and I think about this a lot. Is my goal to not let anything ever psychologically, threaten me? Sure. I mean, I expect the fruition of that. Just like if I run every day, I figure I'll get faster and maybe I'll enjoy it more and whatnot. But in this sense, I'm just grateful to be aware and conscious that, oh, I feel that threat. I'm aware of it and question it, and generally realize there's no real need there's no real validity for me to feel that threat. Why am I? And then consider it. And then I appreciate what you said, Hannah, that if I am on the receiving end of, let's call it, criticism or whatever it may be, or somebody telling me about themselves, then I get to decide, do I respect this person? Do I care to be curious? Because sometimes I just may not. And so, go on your merry way and say what you want. I don't care. Or I'm not going to concern myself. And then with somebody who I do care, to go, okay, they are telling me about themselves, but yeah, like you two, I respect you enough that I'm going to be curious and ask about that or consider it for myself. I do, on the latter, feel like it's relevant that I look at it as every rung I take on the so-called ladder, this sage ladder, this personal agency, and for me, inner security. It's a day by day that I hope that I'm going to take 5 steps on the ladder and realize that it's an ongoing process. I may wake up the next morning and I'm a couple steps down, and it's an ongoing process, or I'm a little I'm feeling threatened and a little haven't been conscious and coming back to that. So over time, I hope to continue ascending to some degree, evolving. That's why I like that word. I want to evolve to where it is more natural, it is more habit, that even when I talk fast, which still happens, I can remain in the sage orientation. We do have some responses in the
Before we
chat.
go to those, I just want to comment on what you're saying,
Yep.
because there's I think, unconscious, implicit aspect to what you're saying, which is that, we take 2 steps forward, a half back, 3 forward, 1 back, that's the process. When I work with couples, their response is always, well, this is going to take time, and we'll chip away at it, and we'll see where we go. And I always find myself challenging the assumption that this is going to be difficult. It's going to take a long time. We're going to slip back. Yes, all of that may be true, but if I set it up that way, I make that more likely to happen. What I encourage, for example, couples to do when I work with them is to say, let's take 3 months and really change the dynamic. Let's just turn the whole thing upside down over a period of 3 months and get you to a whole different level where you're relating in a conscious, kind, respectful manner. And I don't know what that means for your relationship. That will sort itself out. But if you learn to relate in this way, this sage way, the answers will become obvious. So I just don't want people to assume that A, this is difficult, or B, that it's a up and down process. Of course, there are days where I may feel off. But
So are you keeping me from projecting my personal experience on everyone else, Jake?
I'm trying,
Dang.
but you're so charismatic, it's hard.
I was so trying to sell the justification. Totally took the wind out of my sails. I'm victimized by Jake Eagle. That's great. It is. I say, because I say that I've had an experience recently with my, former wife, and I feel like, I feel like I took a step down, and for me, I'm curious about my attachments, that there's still some attachments that, I want to become aware of. Maybe it's harder for me because I'm the worst. We've played with that before. So this is why I'm here. Uh, thank you. Ralph asked back to the oneness. He says, I'm curious about your thoughts of experiencing awe and oneness.
Yeah, it's kind of the perfect question, Ralph, because you've been aware of our work for a while, and you know that I kind of deviated from this work for a few years and worked with Michael Amster to research on the emotion of awe. And we wrote a book called The Power of Awe, and it's something I'm really familiar with. And when I access awe, I do experience, I don't know that it's oneness. I think it's the same thing, just different words, but I experience a dissolution of self. So I'm no longer central and primary. I am just in a state of awareness and amazement and deeply moved by what I refer to as the miracle of being alive. And I realize that that is an experience that is probably common and available to anyone who experiences awe. And it'll be different sources. What creates awe for me may be different than what creates awe for Hannah or how she finds awe. But once we step into it, this dissolution of self and this sense of connecting to something vast, which we can say is an experience of oneness, is very profound. What I've been saying in this work is that when I go there, which I can do very quickly based on the awe method, I reset my nervous system. I break away from all of the internal chatter, all of my anxiety, all of my projections about the future, and I just am in a state of presence. And it's presence that is fostered by something I perceive to be very positive. It's either beautiful or something I deeply value. So that's the state. We created a model that we talked about 3 different levels of consciousness. And when I access awe, I'm in what I know of as the highest level of consciousness, which we call spaciousness. And that would, I think, equate with what Ram Dass is talking about. The issue for me is that I can't live there. I can't stay there. And so I will access other levels of consciousness. And my belief is that the better able I am to manage those levels,
Right.
the more readily I can enter into a state of awe. It's like I'm not being held down by my anxieties and my fears and my concerns if I'm in the sage orientation. So accessing awe, or we can call it oneness, becomes much more readily available to me. So I think of SAGE, and by the way, for those who don't know, in our model of consciousness, we say that the first level, the base level is safety, the things that we do to make ourselves feel safe, taking care of business, taking care of our loved ones. The next level is heart consciousness, which is this state of gratitude and appreciation. And if you think of someone that you just deeply care about, you pretty quickly may find yourself moving into heart consciousness, particularly if it's a healthy relationship. And then beyond that is this state of spaciousness or awe. But the point that I make is getting good at safety consciousness is what makes it easier to access the other levels. And I believe SAGE is one of the best ways to do that.
I did want to mention on Ralph on the aspect of awe. I can't explain it. Maybe I don't, Jake. I think we've talked about it before, but my feeling of awe, my appreciation of sitting out on my deck and looking out at the yellow aspen leaves feels like it has and continues to increase exponentially as I realize I'm interpreting this.
Mhm.
Which for some reason intellectually feels like it should minimize it, to take away the glory of it if you believe in a divine creator, which I actually do. And I can go there and say I think they were made to be beautiful. But for some reason I kind of step off that and go, but they're still somewhat benign. Somebody else can look at them and not see that and whatnot. I'm the one who is attaching my interpretations, my experiences, my feelings, nostalgia, wonder, all these things. I'm doing it, and I just feel the awe in myself, increase. So is that again, that's why I continue to use, struggle somewhat with the oneness term. And to me, it feels connected. Now, do I feel connected to the tree? I actually can't say that I do. For me, that's not where I'm at. That's not the experience I'm having. I'm connecting with me and my own interpretation of that. So there's another perspective.
And Ram Dass might say what you're doing is connecting with your soul or that you're connecting with God.
Okay. It's relevant to some of this of the things here in the chat. Mary actually says, I have noticed that for me, sage applies to me where I am and allows me to shape the unfolding as I witness my growth in spirituality with my community and my God. And we actually have another statement about that, or another input about that. But Mary, you ask, what is the book on oneness that I'm referring to? It is called There Is No Other. There Is No Other, The Way to Harmony and Wholeness. You asked me to type it in. I'll do that in a moment. It's not out yet. I don't think it comes out till October, but I bet you would find it on Amazon, maybe for pre-order. It's out by Harper One, big publisher, and the forward is by Anne Lamott. And it's actually not Anne I'm having on the show. It's edited by Parvati Marcus, who's been with Ram since day one, I think. And I'm going to have Parvati on the show. But the book is There Is No Other. I'm studying it. I'm finding a lot of value for myself, and I resonate a lot with Ram's writings in this. And to me, they are very sage, one, and I see that sage is, as we're talking, I feel it's the best ladder I've found. It's the best way to do this. Maybe you can do mushrooms like Ram did and get there part way. I don't know, but I am grateful. That's what I'll be talking about on the show, is how I resonate with the messages and how I see sage as the how-to, which I feel like we feel that we're missing with most of these constructs, whether you call them spiritual or psychological. There's another quote in here, and it says by INLP Center. I don't know if you guys know who that is. INLP Center. Yeah. It says sage seems to allow to not have to subscribe to a one spiritual belief or leader. It can be used outside and in addition to any specific belief system.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
I
guessing that
align with that. Yeah.
is from Hope. Hi, Hope, if you're the one writing that. Yeah, absolutely. Sage is going to allow each of us to define our God, to define our spirituality for ourselves, which I think is another source of empowerment for me to say, this is how I make sense of the world. This is how I define my spirituality. And that's an interesting act of individuality leading to a spiritual opening that may take some people to a place of oneness or connectedness. So part of what I think can be misconstrued in Ram Dass's writing is that it's an either or, because there are times where he writes that way.
Yeah.
And then every so often, probably only about 10% of the book, he clarifies himself. I'm just looking at a line that I took out of the book this morning where he's talking about the value of being nobody. In other words, don't get attached to who you are. And that's a big emphasis. But then he has this one line. He says, however, you've got to be somebody. Just don't take it too seriously, which I thought was a great line, right? Yeah. And I really appreciated his emphasis on don't be too attached to your ideas, your roles, your position in life. But to live in the world, we do need to have certain ways of defining ourselves. And so it's this balance, it's not an either or. The same thing happens in terms of us versus them. He frames us versus them as a negative, and he thinks it's not helpful to have these kind of binary distinctions. And I agree with that. But then he goes on and he creates other binary distinctions. He talks about mind versus heart. He talks about separateness versus oneness. He talks about high versus low. And I'm not disputing any of those. I'm just wanting us to be really conscious of how we're using language. And there are certain distinctions he thinks are unhelpful and others that he's clearly making binary distinctions. So it's just this being conscious of what we're doing, how we're thinking, how we're setting things up. As soon as I go to making a binary distinction, I'm going to most likely bring to the conversation something that people will react to. They may feel the need to defend themselves, because binary distinctions always leave people wondering, is the side of the distinction I'm on good or bad, right or wrong? As soon as I bring this idea of good, bad, right, wrong, I'm stimulating the primitive brain, which will promote anxiety.
In the chapter that you're reading from, I just get so much value out of it. I so appreciate it. And yeah, then there are things that I don't align with. You know, like Eckhart Tolle talks about the ego in a lot of terms of it being working against us.
Right.
I don't align with that no more than I did in my Christian religion, where you've got, you know, the flesh and the spirit warring against you inside. And in this, I was interested that Ram, with as much as I resonate, he talks about, like you said, the mind and the heart as these dualities, and even says in there that it showcases the heart as often the enemy. I I just I don't relate with that, even though I do his concepts overall. Um,
But
and
my favorite thing he has in the book, I don't know if you got this line, he said, psychosis is consensus about reality.
I did. I underlined it. Yeah. Son of a
Yeah.
gun.
So he's saying that as we create a consensus about reality, going, this is how the world is, we're stepping into a psychosis.
We're screwed. To me, eh, that's that's religion.
Right.
And you said INLP Center. You named the person, if that's who it is.
Hope.
Hope
Hope.
also said they become, talking about spirituality beliefs. They become more of a choice than a need. I agree.
Yeah.
I grew up with the need, and now I look at it as a choice. And boy, I look at these concepts, even the of Ram Dass in this new book, and with Sage. And as much as I interpret a connection with a higher power and a God, and have my construct there, man, I find all this stuff so easy, so palatable for me outside of that as well. I don't have to insert that. So for somebody who's, I had a show with a guy who I'm going to have back on to talk about sage, and he's a describes himself as an atheist. I think he would say he's kind of a wishy-washy atheist because he can't deny some spiritual aspects that to his life, or some things that he does align with that he feels like are of a spiritual nature. But man, this I no no I feel complete alignment with him and those beliefs in talking about these concepts of oneness or connectedness and sage. So yeah, I agreed. Um, Mary says conscious constructive connection. Conscious constructive. Okay. I motivate myself to climb the sage ladder for that type of connection. I dislike myself when I smother my own emotional, vulnerable triggers unconsciously. Okay. I,
Yeah, appreciate the awareness. And
yeah,
you're the smotherer, right? Nobody smothers us.
Right.
We
yeah,
smother ourselves.
yeah. I align, Mary. I would be the ignorer. I don't really have a place for that. I didn't used to have a place for that. And then, well, again, it's INLP Center. So if it's hope, says it seems to create more empathy towards others when you see them as just doing themselves. Yes. Can I say it? And I empathy one, and I feel the sage construct has helped me embrace boundaries where I just did not, I just failed in the past. I just did not even, I had the experts on the show. I had Nedra Tawab Glover, and I had Terry Cole. These are some of our current big names with boundaries, and I got it intellectually, but I had such a hard time integrating it into my life. I really struggled to integrate it. And with Sage, I am. So yeah, having empathy to, hey, they're doing themselves. And I may not want to expose myself to them doing themselves anymore. And no blame, no accusation. Oh, I comfort myself with that. Uh, yeah.
As we got further into this practice, I think our social world got smaller and smaller.
Mm.
And but it was setting boundaries and choosing who and what we wanted to be around.
Yeah, there's certain things we didn't want to empathize with.
Yeah.
If someone
Wow.
is victimizing himself or martyring herself continuously, um, we didn't really want to empathize. We care, and yet if we couldn't find a role to play with that person that felt constructive, then we started to redefine our boundaries because we don't want to be enablers. We don't want to commiserate.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there a place for us to be ourselves in relationship to a person who is traveling a very different path?
Well, I like that line. Certain things we don't want to empathize with. I
Yeah,
think
and in our relating, we're both pretty intolerant, which I think often surprises people. But we're both fairly intolerant of things that, um, well, of immature behavior. We're intolerant of um, treating each other poorly or disrespectfully or being impatient or not being kind. We're very intolerant. And if we are struggling, we're also intolerant of struggling. In other words, if we have a couple of bad days, which we haven't had for a long time, we're out looking for help. We're like, we need to figure this out. We don't sit in struggle well, which I think has turned into a virtue, even though I didn't think of it that way when this started. I was thinking more that about the value of tolerance and acceptance and allowing your partner to be where they are and do what they need to do. Some of that I still believe, but it doesn't change our expectation that we will always treat each other respectfully. We will always be kind, even if we don't agree on something.
yeah, again, the boundaries. I hear that in there, and I see that in you guys, and you're comfortable in it because you own it. It's that virtue is yours, and you accept and embrace it. at peace with it, in essence, I would say, for yourself.
And you're using the word it a lot. So own it. What we're doing is we're owning ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Mm,
We're trying to bring this closer. We own ourselves. We own our values. We own our commitments. Just notice how often we'll come back to the linguistics, the words, and what a difference it makes. So you may be listening to this and think, gee, this is really an interesting idea. I'm going to try and put it into practice. So you go to put it into practice. For example, being more intolerant of things with your partner, but you're not using sage language, it won't go well. It won't go well. The other person will feel criticized and get defensive. So it's really important to incorporate the language. And Hope, who's with the INLP Center, has one of the best programs in the country teaching people about neurolinguistic programming, NLP, which the original definition of NLP was the study of subjective experience. Great. It's understanding that everybody is creating their own version of reality in their own way. And that as a student of NLP, if I understand how you're creating your experience, I may be able to help you shift it. It's really brilliant. However, it doesn't introduce subjective language. So, one more time, you have this great model, just like many of the others that are out there, but using language that's inconsistent with the intention of the model. If the intention of the model is to empower people, then we want to give people a different way to speak about themselves where they're taking full responsibility. And that's the piece in SAGE that I encourage you to really take hold of. Even if you don't understand it, if you just start to alter your language so you acknowledge, I'm creating my emotions, I'm creating my interpretations, I'm creating my ideas about who I am, what I can do, what I can't do. These things are not imposed on me and they're not absolute. This is where the frame starts to loosen up and open up, and all kinds of new possibilities become available to us.
the it. I think we
The
still need to develop an it buzzer.
Mhm.
Keep it in your pocket or set your phone off or shocks you or something. I obviously I fall out of it. I fall out of it.
Bit.
It's son of a gun. Yeah.
What do you fall out of?
Myself, my
Yeah.
awareness. Yeah. And give my power away. I think to myself, I victimize myself when I do that. I just gave my personal agency to it.
Right.
And there's the beauty of the bumbling along often of the
Makes
language. And like right now, I slow down. I
Yeah.
just am unable to do it. I want to be so good
You're
in
unable to do what?
it. Jake. It is guiding my life. Yeah. And this is here's the ladder.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the ladder.
Yeah.
And slowing down. Yeah. Sometimes it is kind of like the take a
What
deep
is
breath.
what is
It. It would it would be. Yeah, sometimes it feels difficult to speak on something. I have to back up and get to verbing things,
Right.
and ultimately we're back to awareness. Can I sit
Right.
in consciousness and speak? I remind myself of the ers, likes, and you knows, the things that I learned at an early age in the Dale Carnegie courses that my dad would take me to and be taught in that. And I am very adept at speaking without ers, likes, you knows, and taking the pauses. And I can even talk fast doing that. It's taken a lot of training. Apparently, I'm not there yet with it.
Yeah.
Giving the power to it instead of retaining my personal agency, I then have to get to restructure my language. But for me, I got to slow down. And you guys, even that, your cadence in speaking is intentional. I don't think I've ever heard you talk fast. Maybe it's easy to say it's not in your nature. Well, I'll ask you, is that just that it was never your nature or it was just a product of speaking consciously?
Yeah, no, it's in my nature to speak fast. I can speak extremely quickly if I want to, particularly when I get going about something I'm passionate about. But the problem when I do that is I become less conscious of what I'm saying. I'm not as aware of the choices I'm making. So it's really a mistake for me to speak like that.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jared says here, our conscious awareness is the foundation for responding intentionally
Yes.
rather than reacting emotionally.
Yes.
Yeah, that the reaction, of course, but just the concept we've spoken here of autopilot, that I get on autopilot and I can't, I'm not at the place now where I can speak sagely with subjective language, owning my personal agency if I am on autopilot, as showcased moments ago when I fell into an it valley.
Right. There's a theme in one of the chapters in Ram Dass's book where he talks about he has a distinction between soul and role. That when we connect with our soul, we're no longer seeing ourselves as a role of a husband or a
Yeah.
father or daughter or friend, and that it's a much more profound way to experience life. So he says you take the soul and you put that into he says the foreground. So in other words, that's what you're focused on. One of the ways I think about this is that if I am aware of awe, going back to Ralph's comment, and the miracle of life, if the way I talk about it actually is that it's the background, that it's the continuous background of my life, that's the canvas that I'm painting on. The background of life is this miracle. And now I'm going to paint on that. And because I recognize the miracle, I want to paint in a way that's respectful and appropriate and thoughtful and intentional. So, in both what he's saying and what I'm saying right now, it's setting a frame that makes it easier for us to be intentional, conscious, deliberate. And so every morning, waking up, set your frame for the day. And whatever metaphor works for you. Mine is this idea that the background is always the miracle of life, the beauty. What am I going to paint on that today? Ram Dass is saying he puts forward the soul. He remembers that he is a soul every day and that that's what he holds as he was going through his days.
Yeah, a soul and not the role. That's probably worthy of focus again. I know we've done one of these sessions on identity.
Yeah, probably do another one and maybe work with some of the things in that chapter in his book.
Yeah. Um, Mary here says, she says, it is freeing, and she means she frees herself. Such a sense of empowerment for me to value my beliefs without worrying about convincing others to believe as I do. I can respect others and myself without being too attached.
Yeah, without being too attached for me is the key part of that. Yeah.
And I continue to find people struggling with some of the concepts around attachment. And I'll bring up again, I think I've mentioned it. Bob Rosen recently wrote the book Detached. I did a show with him and I posed that to him. So is your goal that we just are not attached to anything? He said, well, no, but it's the severity of that. I still align with that because to some degree, again, I don't want to be sitting on a mountaintop alone or in a closet or be in prison and just, I found my center. I'm good. I don't need anything. It sounds really boring to me. I enjoy my desires and things that I align with, but I question now the severity. Yeah. Am I threatened without them? If you take those away, or if I feel they're taken away, if I lose them, I mean, I just lost a almost 32-year marriage or lost. It ended. That ended. So that ideal that I had doesn't exist anymore. The family home we do not have now. And boy, my attachment to that was dramatic. And as I continue to work on that level of attachment,
So what do you think's happened as you've gone from someone who was really attached to what you called the homestead, this really cool place that you built and created and you raised all your kids there. And now you chose to let go of that. And now you're living in a more traditional, smaller home with some of your kids. What happened to you as a result of that? What happened to your identity?
You guys took it away with Sage. You completely destroyed it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the unraveling of this identity that was built on attachments, and now coming to, back that's why I so liked this. Well, our work in Sage, we've been doing for, a long while, but I confirmed myself reading Rom's, chapter 7 in this new book, I think, on that I am not my roles, I'm not my achievements. And I get to enter into those if I want to. I can, like he says, I can put that costume on. Even that feels a little much for me these days, but I can engage with those things. I can be the podcaster. I can be the dad. I can do those things, but man, those are I'm here right now. Man, I'm grateful for the memories. I'm
Would
grateful
you
for the
agree that your identity has expanded as a result of giving up the home?
expanded.
Well, you
Tell
used
me.
to be a guy, a year ago, you were a guy who was a pretty happy, content human being living in a home he created in a location that he chose that you loved. And you had to give that up. And now you're still okay, but you're living in a much smaller rental home that's kind of traditional. So to me, it's an expansion of who you are. And that this is what happens when our identity is threatened. We can either repress and constrict, or we can expand by opening up and say, okay, I did love that home and it was a huge part of my identity. That home was a huge part of my identity, but not a requirement for me to feel good about myself.
It's so vast. It's almost hard to put into words. My peace, I peace myself. My anxieties, the effort that it took to maintain that attachment,
Hmm.
I was wearing myself out with, and didn't really realize it. And now it's a different
It
experience of
is.
life. It's a different experience of me.
It
It's so
is.
much more peaceful. There's
It is.
having the
It's so
threat.
much. It is so much more peaceful, and it is
It
so.
is so much more. I piece myself to death. Yeah. I piece myself. I secure. I secure myself, which this is the verbing aspect of Sage. I secure myself because I still don't know if and when I'll be fully secure. And I don't really care. I just want to be able to secure myself. Uh, so yeah, the expansiveness of my identity. I'm curious as can be about it. I inspire myself every day with looking at how I be without those attachments, without having to have those roles. Yeah, in that way, I'd say I empower myself. I interest myself, and I would say I equip myself. I can connect with everything. So much more. Yeah, yeah. We would. I think we could do another focus on that. I do have a. Mary says she does not enjoy you talking fast, Jake. So stop that. Um, Etienne here. Good to see you here. He says, I have a question. In many cultures, there are rituals of mourning. Grief is often not dealt with as an individual matter. How do you see big, challenging life events like grief being dealt with by the person grieving, but also the people around that person? With the Sage orientation, how would you see family members support each other with Sage when they are grieving a loss together?
Yeah. So there's no formula. This comes back to interpretation. How do we make meaning?
Hmm.
We went to a therapist for many years who was wonderful guy that we really respected. He helped us kind of create the foundation of our marriage. And I remember him saying to me that grief is an optional emotion. I've shared this with people over the years, and nobody has ever appreciated or liked that. Grief is an optional emotion. I'm not suggesting he's right. I don't know about that. But what it did for me, what that comment did for me, is I opened my mind to the possibility that grief doesn't have a predefined process or a predefined definition. And I think the most important thing is, again, to be conscious. What are our choices in terms of grieving? How do we choose to go through this? And that varies by the individual, and it also varies by culture, without any doubt. There are cultures where when somebody passes away, it's a celebration. It's a celebration and a time of great respect and reverence. Um, and then there are others that are almost the opposite of that.
I again, not to make the focus Ram Dass, but man, I like his perspective that he talks about death in the book. And on one hand, I think with the death of a loved one, he would one cry. He would have the emotion. But as you'll read in, if you read the book, not that I imagine it's in his other ones too, but he also looks at it as we're a soul. And so that, that person's left their, what does he call it? Their astronaut suit or something like that. He refers to it, left it here, and now they're somewhere else. So why be sad for, at least for them? Now you might, but yeah, what you just said. I mean, Etienne, I played this game with some of my own circumstances that I didn't intend to lose. I didn't intend for the marriage to end. I didn't intend for the home to go, but to look at it and go, okay, could anybody else, we're back to S.A.G.E, could they have interpreted it differently? I have other friends who have had divorces and they're pretty thrilled about it. They were tired of it. They feel free, feel like I got a new lease on life and whatnot. They're really excited. I didn't feel that, but I looked at it and I thought, well, I could, but I don't. It's me. It's my it's the meaning I'm putting into. What is the meaning, and is it constructive? Mary, you talked about beliefs, and I do feel more. I peace myself with my beliefs, even if somebody else threatens it. Now, granted, that I questioning also, is the belief constructive for me? If I'm getting criticism on it, if I get criticism on a belief from Jake and Hannah, I wouldn't feel threatened. I care enough to consider that, gosh, is my belief working well for me? Is the meaning I'm putting, at the end, I just had a guy on a show who had his 2 teen kids were killed instantaneously. And I think it's the show that published yesterday on my podcast. And it's on grief in essence. And we talked about that, about, do you let it destroy you? Do you let it inspire you? And we're kind of to PTSD or PTSG, uh, growth disorder, or no, what is that? You get the point, the post-traumatic. Um,
Growth versus
yes.
stress, right?
Yeah. Just address that though, because even the statement of grieving and it's the meaning you attach to it, I have some compassion, feel some compassion for those who it can feel like you're minimizing. That we come to that so often. If we don't validate the feeling, we're by proxy minimizing.
Well, you come to that often.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't personally have that experience, but I hear you bring it up fairly consistently. I'm not sure why, but it's very common that you'll bring that up. I never really feel like I'm minimizing another person's experience if I'm witnessing them. If I'm present and I'm witnessing you, I don't feel that I'm minimizing in any way. So I don't know what you're doing differently.
We don't have to go into it. I think I have some, I influence myself with my 20-year-old age kids who
Oh,
are
right.
in psychology. I've got one, she's doing her, I can't remember what the term is. She's grad school now. She's doing her whatever, and they spend so much time on validation, affirmation, and so much focus on the marginalized. And if you don't validate their experience, it's minimizing, especially coming from the 6 foot tall white American guy.
Right.
So I hear that and I think it doesn't feel like, I don't know that the validation's helping them, but I see the friction people cause themselves in it.
Let's do a
Yeah,
show. Let's
with
do a
themselves.
show, a conversation on that, because I think you just defined where it comes from for you, and we're not exposed to that. But when you bring it up, I think it's worth a fuller conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're at an hour. I appreciate you guys in the chat. Everybody, we still got a lot of people with us. Thank you. Etienne says, thank you. Jake, do you and others perceive your witnessing as neutral or warm?
I would say warm.
I do. I mean, I've been at the hand of it. You've heard my stories and woes on my and things, and I completely fulfill myself with your witnessing and not your validating my story. Yeah. Yeah. All right. That was the last one there. Hey, thank you guys for being here, Jake and Hannah.
Great to connect. Thanks
Always a
everybody
gift.
for joining us. And I don't know what the topic will be next week, but we'll be back. And if you have friends who you think would benefit, we're only inviting people to these events if they've downloaded the S.A.G.E blueprint. Otherwise, we kind of have to start at the beginning and explain every little thing. So if you have people who you think would benefit, encourage them to download the blueprint, and then they'll be invited to these conversations in the future.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Kevin, how was it?
It was great. You guys were wonderful. All right. Well, there's my next rung on the ladder.